Welcome to Le Weekend, your essential roundup of French news on culture, business, the economy, and current affairs. We bring you a convenient way to catch up on the stories from the past week in France, plus an additional focus feature blending reportage and cultural context. These are the headlines for Monday, February 2nd. France finally got a 2026 budget on Monday when two no-confidence motions failed, allowing the legislation to pass and heralding a period of relative stability for Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu's minority government, as reported by Le Monde. Rideshare platform Uber is in talks with French Social Security Agency, URSSAF, after the driver's status came into dispute. Uber said on Monday it was in talks with French Social Security Agency, URSSAF, which a media report said had concluded that the US-based company should treat its drivers as employees, as reported by Reuters. France's manufacturing production rose at the strongest rate in 3 years. France's manufacturing sector expanded in January and had its fastest increase in production, helped by plans to increase defense and military spending in Europe, according to a survey by S&P Global, as reported by La Tribune. Luxury group Hermès is opening a new leather goods factory in Les Andelys, Normandy, creating 260 jobs. This project is part of the group's vertical integration strategy, which involves investing in its production capacity in France. Hermès already has factories in Normandy and Calvados, as reported by Les Echos. The headlines on Tuesday, February 3rd. Paris prosecutors raided the French offices of Elon Musk's social media platform X. Prosecutors said they had summoned the X owner for a voluntary interview as part of the investigation into alleged political interference and sexual deepfakes, as reported by Le Monde. A teacher was stabbed by a student in a southern France high school. An art teacher was in critical condition after she was stabbed several times by a 14-year-old pupil during class in a middle school in Sanary-sur-Mer in southern France on Tuesday, according to the local prosecutor in Toulon, as reported by Reuters. French authorities have rescued over 6,000 migrants crossing the English Channel in 2025. French authorities rescued more than 6,000 migrants attempting to reach Britain in small boats last year, while 25 people died and 2 remain missing, according to figures from the Maritime Prefecture, as reported by RFI. Residents of Lyon's Chemical Valley are seeking compensation over contamination by PFAS. Arkema and Daikin Chemicals, two companies suspected of being responsible for the largest areas of PFAS pollution in France, have been summoned before the Lyon Judicial Court by 192 adults and children living in a polluted area south of Lyon. The plaintiffs are seeking more than 36 million euros in compensation for the harm they have suffered, as reported by Le Monde. The headlines for Wednesday, February 4th. President Macron's most senior diplomat was in Moscow on Tuesday to hold talks with Russian officials, according to a source who was aware of the meeting and 2 diplomatic sources, as reported by France 24. Publishing house 360 Business Media has ceased publication of Forbes France after 10 years to focus on Time and other projects. The last issue was published in December, as reported by Les Echos. The Ministry of Transport has appointed 2 mediators for consultations aimed at defining prospects for the maritime sector. Strikers in Marseille, who are protesting against social dumping and defending the French flag, have extended their action until Friday. The ministry acknowledged the concerns shared by trade unions and businesses regarding the future of the France First register, as reported by Le Monde. The headlines on Thursday, February 5th. 2 Chinese nationals suspected of spying from a French Airbnb are under investigation. The 2 individuals suspected of trying to intercept satellite communications from a base in an Airbnb rental property in southwestern France have been placed under formal investigation, according to the Paris Public Prosecutor's Office, as reported by Reuters. France's Armed Forces Minister said the French Navy seized more than 4 tons of cocaine in French Polynesia and intercepted another boat carrying the drug in the Caribbean. As the US and other countries step up their fight against drug trafficking, as reported by Reuters. The priceless crown dropped in the Louvre heist is to be fully restored. The crown of French Empress Eugénie, which was abandoned by fleeing thieves who staged a brazen robbery at the Louvre last year, is nearly intact and will be fully restored, the museum said on Wednesday, as reported by RFI. France hopes to make screening for lung cancer routine by 2030. Screening for lung cancer could become as routine in France as checks for breast or colon cancer, according to Health Minister Stéphanie Rist, who says the country is preparing to roll out a pilot program to screen thousands of at-risk individuals from next month on, as reported by RFI. The headlines on Friday, February 6th. France deployed its first Argo floats capable of diving to depths of 6,000 meters to measure ocean currents and global warming. France is the 3rd country to design these autonomous instruments after the United States and China. By 2028, the French fleet will be reinforced by 30 new floats, mainly deployed in the North Atlantic, as reported by Le Figaro. The Office of the President said that France and Bahrain have signed a bilateral deal on defense, which includes strategic information sharing, as reported by Reuters. France and Canada have opened consulates in Greenland, as both countries, which oppose US President Donald Trump's claim to Greenland, opened consulates in the capital in a show of support for the local government. The French consul said that the first priority will be to listen to Greenlanders, as reported by Le Monde. Former French Culture Minister Jacques Lang offered his resignation from the Arab World Institute in Paris, according to a letter cited by AFP. On Friday, an investigation had been opened by the National Financial Prosecutor's Office into Lang's alleged links with American financier and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, as reported by France 24. 6 people sustained minor injuries in Grenoble when a grenade was thrown into a beauty salon mid-afternoon. The shop window exploded, injuring 6 people slightly. The explosive device was not intended to kill, according to the prosecutor, as reported by France Info. You are listening to Le Weekend. And now that you're all caught up with the main headlines from the past week, it's time for our focus story. Today we look at why a priceless crown that was never worn made the news this week. We're exploring the story that connects a dramatic museum heist, meticulous restoration work, and one of history's most fascinating women who never got to wear the crown made in her honor. This week, the Louvre Museum released photographs that have captivated art lovers and historians worldwide. The images show a mangled, crushed imperial crown, a piece of 19th century magnificence reduced to a twisted heap of gold, diamonds, and emeralds. Yet, remarkably, museum officials announced that this damaged treasure can be fully restored. But first we need to rewind to last October and then journey back even further to the glittering world of Second Empire France. On October 19, 2025, in the span of just 6 to 7 minutes, thieves executed one of the most audacious museum robberies in recent history. They targeted the Apollo Gallery in the Louvre, one of the most storied rooms in one of the world's most famous museums. Using a simple angle grinder, they cut through display cases and seized 8 priceless jewels from France's former ruling families, pieces with a total estimated value of 88 million euros, approximately 104 million US dollars. But something went wrong during their rushed escape. As they fled through a window, one item slipped from their grasp and tumbled to the pavement below: the crown on Empress Eugénie, wife of Napoleon III. The thieves, in their rush, left it behind, crushed and deformed, but miraculously intact. Unfortunately, the thieves also stole the Queen Marie-Amélie's sapphire set and Empress Marie-Louise's emeralds, which remain missing. For more than 3 months, the fate of this imperial treasure remained uncertain. The crown was briefly held by criminal investigators, then handed over to the Louvre's Department of Decorative Arts for assessment. The museum went to work but remained silent as curators held their breath, and this week they finally spoke. When experts examined the crown, they found both devastation and hope. The piece had suffered what they termed crushing damage. It was significantly deformed, bent out of its original circular shape. But here's what matters: nearly every component survived. Of the crown's 1,354 diamonds, only about 10 small stones from the base perimeter are missing. All 56 emeralds remain. Of the 8 golden eagles that once soared around its circumference, 7 are intact. The 8 palmettes, those elegant fan-shaped motifs inspired by palm leaves, survived, though several sustained damage. The museum's report paints a picture of the crown's ordeal. First, there was the stress of being wrenched through the narrow slot cut by the angle grinder, a space far too small for such a delicate object. The crown's mount, designed to be flexible and lightweight, couldn't withstand the force. Its hoops detached, one falling away inside the gallery itself. Then came the violent impact with the ground, which crushed and flattened the remaining structure. Yet amid this catalogue of damage, there's remarkable news. The crown retains its near-complete integrity. Unlike so many restoration projects that require reconstruction or reproduction of lost elements, this one can proceed with almost entirely original materials. It will be, as the Louvre put it, simply a matter of reshaping the framework. The Louvre has assembled an extraordinary team for this delicate work. An advisory board led by Laurence Descartes, the museum's president and director, will oversee the restoration methodology. The committee includes historians, mineralogists, and artists, each bringing specialized knowledge to ensure historical accuracy and technical precision. And it gets even more interesting. 5 of France's most prestigious jewelry houses have been invited to lend their expertise. The bidding process for the lead restorer just opened this week. Meleriot, Chaumet, Cartier, Boucheron, and Van Cleef and Arpels, names synonymous with the highest levels of French craftsmanship, will support the operation. These houses carry centuries of knowledge about working with precious metals and gemstones, techniques that have been passed down through generations. The restoration itself, estimated to cost between 40 and 50,000 euros, represents only a fraction of the highest total impact. When you factor in upgraded security, higher insurance premiums, and the intangible damage to public trust, the true cost runs much deeper. But for now, the focus remains on bringing this crown back to its former glory. This brings us to a fascinating paradox at the heart of this story. This magnificent crown, crafted with such precision and adorned with such splendor, was never meant to be worn. It was never used in a coronation. Empress Eugénie herself, for whom it was specially created, likely never placed it upon her head. To understand why, we need to travel back to 1855 to the Paris Universal Exposition. Napoleon III, the nephew of the legendary Napoleon Bonaparte, has established the Second French Empire just 3 years earlier. He was desperate to legitimize his rule, to wrap himself in the glory and mythology of his uncle's reign. What better way than to display the magnificence of his court at a World's Fair? The crown was commissioned from Alexandre Gabriel Lemonnier, the emperor's official jeweler. At 13 centimeters high and 15 centimeters in diameter, it was designed to showcase the imperial symbolism of the First Empire. The 8 golden eagles are direct references to the eagle standards carried by French regiments during the Napoleonic Wars. The palmettes, the emeralds, the cascade of diamonds, every element proclaimed imperial power and dynastic legitimacy. It was, however, primarily a showpiece, a statement of wealth and authority meant to dazzle visitors to the exposition. It represented power, not power worn, and this distinction tells us something profound about Empress Eugénie herself and the strange, constrained role she occupied. María Eugenia Ignacia Agustina de Palafox y Kirkpatrick was born in Granada, Spain on May 5, 1826, during an earthquake, a dramatic entrance for a woman whose life would be defined by upheaval. Her father was a Spanish nobleman who had fought for the French during Napoleon's Peninsular War, making the family afrancesados, French sympathizers despised by many Spaniards. When the Carlist Wars erupted, the family fled to Paris in 1834, where young Eugénie received her education surrounded by enlightened society. She was, by all accounts, remarkable, beautiful, with distinctive red hair that set her apart, but also athletic, adventurous, and unconventional. At 13, she ran away from an English boarding school and tried to board a ship to India. She was educated, well-read, and moved easily through Parisian literary salons. She met Louis-Napoleon Bonaparte, then President of the French Republic, in 1849 at the residence of his cousin, Princess Mathilde. Their courtship was anything but conventional. Napoleon III, newly proclaimed emperor in 1852, was expected to marry into European royalty to secure a dynasty through strategic allegiance. His ministers urged him to pursue Princess Adelaide of Sweden, but Napoleon, whether from genuine affection or political calculation, or both, chose Eugénie instead. In a speech to his legislature, he declared his break with kingdoms where heirs sought alliances with sovereign houses, obtaining an accomplished princess but only one of secondary rank and another religion. He would marry for love, he said, and for shared Catholic faith. The civil marriage took place on January 29, 1853, followed by a religious ceremony at Notre Dame. Eugénie de Montijo became Empress of the French. She was 26 years old. For the next 17 years, Eugénie reigned over what historians have called the Circus Empire, a glittering, decadent court where she transformed the Tuileries Palace into a center of European society. She revolutionized fashion, introducing the cage crinoline in 1855 and later abandoning vast skirts for a more fitted silhouette. She effectively created haute couture as we know it, working closely with designer Charles Frederick Worth. Whenever Eugénie wore something, Europe followed. But her influence didn't stop at fashion. She served as regent on 3 occasions in 1859, 1865, and fatally in 1870, when Napoleon III was absent. She attended council meetings, pushed for women's rights to professional training and university education, and declared that a woman who could support herself need never submit to tyranny. Male ministers snickered, but she persisted. Yet she was also trapped by the very role that gave her power. Her first duty was to produce an heir. After a miscarriage, she gave birth to the Prince Imperial on March 16, 1856. The pregnancy and delivery were brutally difficult, leaving her so weak she couldn't walk unassisted until May. Doctors warned that another pregnancy might kill her. There would be no more children and no further physical relationship with her husband. Napoleon III, suffering from his own health problems, took numerous lovers. Countess Virginie de Castiglione, an Italian spy called the most beautiful woman in Europe. Marianne Walewska, wife of the Foreign Affairs Minister. Marguerite Bélanger, a circus performer. The Tuileries became, as one historian put it, a carousel of affairs and scandals, where adultery was the norm and a night with the emperor was considered a badge of honor. Eugénie's response was to become increasingly rigid about public morality and ceremony. She presided over this debauched court with icy dignity, focusing obsessively on etiquette, while her husband's infidelities became the talk of Europe. She was criticized for being Spanish, for being Catholic, for being a woman with political opinions. She was blamed for the disastrous French intervention in Mexico, though historians now acknowledge her role was minimal. She was accused of pushing for war with Prussia in 1870, though she actually counseled against it. The Franco-Prussian War destroyed everything. Napoleon III, barely able to sit on a horse due to excruciating bladder stones, rode off hoping for a glorious death in battle. Instead, he surrendered to Bismarck at Sedan. Left alone in Paris, Eugénie served as regent as French defeats mounted and revolutionary fervor grew. When ministers suggested firing on the mob surrounding the Tuileries, she refused. "I shall not be the Marie Antoinette of this revolution," she declared. On September 4, 1870, the Second Republic was proclaimed. Disguised in plain clothes, Eugénie slipped through revolutionary Paris and found refuge with her American dentist, Dr. Thomas Evans, who helped her escape to England. The Second Empire was over. Eugénie would never return to France as Empress. She lived in exile for the next 50 years, outliving Napoleon III, who died in 1873, and their son. The Prince Imperial was killed fighting in the Zulu War in 1879. Meanwhile, the crown created in her honor followed its own journey. After the empire fell in 1870, Napoleon III was owed money. He had grown the collection of crown jewels with his own funds. In 1875, the crown was returned to Eugénie. This symbol of power she never truly wielded. While many crown jewels were sold at auction in 1887, this crown was eventually preserved by her descendants and private collectors before being donated to the Louvre in 1988, long after her death. Ironically, the emperor's matching crown did not survive. Today, Eugenie's crown is one of only 3 crowns of French sovereigns still preserved in France, alongside the crown of Louis XV and the so-called crown of Charlemagne. The crown will return to public view eventually once concerns about security are addressed. When it does, visitors will see a masterpiece of 19th century jewelry. What they might not see is the woman it was made for, a woman who advocated for women's education, who supported female artists and writers, who showed unexpected steel in defending principles over power. Eugenie de Montijo never got to wear this crown that represented a role she both inhabited and transcended, a golden cage that was beautiful and confining in equal measures. Perhaps the fact that the crown was never worn makes it more honest. It was always meant to be looked at, admired, studied as a symbol of power rather than its reality. Thank you for listening to Le Weekend, your one-stop destination for the main headlines in France. Catch our weekly roundup every weekend wherever you get your podcasts. Stay informed.